What's up, everybody? So in this question, we're going to be dealing with a word problem that relates to piecewise functions. So it's a word problem that you've probably seen a few times. So it's a tax word problem. So under a certain tax law, the first 60,000 of earnings is subject to 30% tax. Earnings greater than 60,000 are subject to 42% tax. And there's two parts to the question. Part A, we have to write a function that models this situation. And then part B, we have to determine the tax on earnings of 110,000. So to make a function for this situation, let's first show what's going on in a diagram, just so we can maybe visually see it better. So there's actually no limit here. This keeps going on forever. So this is earnings of 0. So anything up to $60,000 in earnings, what's happening is you are being taxed on that earnings at 30%. So for example, if you make $20,000, then you're getting taxed 30%. That would be $6,000. If you're making $40,000, 30% of that is $12,000. So that's your tax, $12,000 on $40,000 worth of earnings. If you're making $60,000, 30% tax on that is $18,000. So anything from $60,000 and below, the tax is 30%. But what happens is anything after $60,000, anything greater than $60,000 is subject to 42% tax. Now, here is where people get a little confused. Whatever's over $60,000, that full amount doesn't get taxed, only the portion that's above $60,000. So for example, let's say that you make $80,000. Well, what's going to happen is that first $60,000 is going to be taxed at 30%, and then that remaining $20,000, the amount over $60,000, right? $80,000 minus $60,000, $20,000 is taxed at 42%. Right? So that's just an example. So knowing that, how can we make a function for this situation, or for any situation, for any earnings that we input in the function? We could figure out what the tax is right away. Well, let's introduce some variables here. So let this capital T equal tax paid, and then let X equal your earnings. So what we're going to do is we are going to make a function for the tax paid in terms of the earnings. So depending on whatever the earnings are, we plug in the earnings into our function and we'll get the tax. So notice how this function, there's going to be two cases for it. So the first case is if the earnings are less than or equal to 60,000. Right? So that's going to be this case here. So that's going to be the first case. And then the other case is if earnings are greater than 60,000. Well, as we mentioned, if earnings are less than or equal to 60,000, all you're doing is you're taking that earnings and you're taking 30% of that. So it would just be 0.3x. Remember, you got to change this percentage into a decimal. So 0.3x. So again, if you're making 40,000, if we plug in 40,000 for the x, 0.3 times 40,000 gives us 12,000. So that would be the tax if our earnings was 40,000. Now, what about if the earnings are greater than 60,000? So let's take that same example we talked about, the 80,000, and let's just pretend it's some value x. Okay, so we don't know what the earnings are, but let's say a general value x. We just know that x is going to be greater than 60,000. Well, what's the tax going to be when x is greater than 60,000? Well, if it's greater than 60,000, then we for sure know that for the first 60,000, we have to pay this 30% tax. So we know that our tax is going to be 60,000 times the tax rate of 0.3. right? That first 60,000, we're definitely paying 30% tax on that. And then what's going to happen, I'm kind of running out of room here, so I'll just continue it down here, is that the portion of the earnings above 60,000, so let's represent that as x minus 60,000, right? So the portion of the earnings above 60,000, which we can represent as x minus 60,000. So for example, if this is 80,000, if we go back to that example, this bracket here, x minus 60,000, would be 20,000, 80,000 minus 60,000. So that portion above 60,000 is getting taxed at 0.42 or at 42%. So now we have this expression 60,000 times 0.3 plus x minus 60,000 in brackets times 0.42. So I took this expression and rewrote it in one line. So I got 60,000 times 0.3 plus I brought this 0.42 over in front of the bracket. I got the 0.42 in front of x minus 60,000. So let's simplify this a little more. So 60,000 times 0.3, that gives us 18,000, which is the tax we're going to have to pay on that first bracket, plus this 0.42 I'm going to distribute inside the bracket. So 0.42 times x gives us 0.42x. And then 0.42 times negative 60,000, that gives us negative 25,200. And to simplify this more, notice how this 18,000 and this negative 25,200, those are like terms. 18,000 minus 25,200, that gives us negative 7,200. So let's put this 0.42x in front. And then 18,000 minus 25,200 would give us minus 7,200. And that is the simplified function for the tax if the earnings are greater than 60,000. So that expression you would put here, and you are done part A. So this is the simplified function for the tax paid. And notice how there are two cases. When the earnings are less than or equal to 60,000, and when the earnings are greater than 60,000. So moving on to part B, we have our function from part A, and now we have to find the tax when the earnings equal 110,000. Well, if earnings are 110,000, which case are we dealing with? The first case or the second case? Well, the second case, because the earnings are greater than 60,000. When the earnings are greater than 60,000, the tax paid is going to be this function here. So to find the tax, actually let's do it over here. To find the tax when the earnings are 110,000, we plug it into this formula. So we'd have 0.42 times 110,000 minus 7,200. So 0.42 times 110,000, that would give us 46,200 minus 7,200. And then 46,200 minus 7,200, that would give us 39,000. So that's the answer to part B. So if you're making $110,000, you got to pay $39,000 in tax. And you can check your answer with that diagram that we made before, right? If you remember, so 60,000, 30%, anything over 60,000 is 42%. And we're making 110,000. So the first 60,000, that's taxed at 30%. And then the amount over 60,000 to get to 110,000 is 50,000. So 50,000 of that 110,000 is taxed at 42%. So this would end up being 18,000 if we multiply these two. And then if you multiply these two, you would get 21,000. And then when you add these, you get 39,000. And notice how that's the same answer that we got here. So this answer makes intuitive sense, so we can be pretty confident that our function is correct and we got the correct tax on $110,000 worth of earnings. Yo, what's up guys? Thanks for checking out my channel. Hopefully you got some value from the video you just watched. If you did get some value, big favor to ask you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Any questions, any recommendations on things you'd like to see, please leave it in the comments section. Also check out the description box below for links to material and content related to the video you just watched. Peace out.